First time you've ever tuned in, dear listener. First moment of the Wiggly Podcast, not sure whether to switch off or carry on listening. Well, here's what Wizzy Woo says on the iTunes review. She gives us 5 stars and she says, actually she could be a man, but she wouldn't be called Wizzy Woo. The Wiggly team are a joy. After listening to them, you will find it hard to fight the urge to get out those wellies and go on and head to the bottom of the garden. They're honest, Farmer Phil, who joins me this week.
Hello.
They're honest. Informative, Ricardo.
Hello.
And relentlessly effervescent. Yes, that's you, Heather. It's me. They will make you realise that you're not alone in wanting to make the best of what we've got. And you can guarantee that Heather is not afraid to ask the questions that the rest of us townies are thinking. If you're remotely interested in anything to do with gardening, nature or the planet, you must listen to this. And I confess, I am on my way to becoming a Farmer Phil fangirl.
Ideal. Eat your heart out, Ricardo.
You all right, Rich?
Yeah, I am. I'm just slightly shocked by that. That's all.
We're Wiggly Wigglers. We're on Lower Blakemere Farm sofa, and we are winging our way to you through the Ethernet, internet, webnet world.
So that's a nice one, isn't it?
Yeah. This week we'll find out how you can claim a free bag of spudders, but only if you're in the UK. If you're in America, we can't send spuds over there because you don't even like our boots in the airport having a bit of potato soil on them, so sorry about that. We will find out about lamb docking. We've got a message from Podchef. I have to say a big hello to a new Wiggly fan. So from the team...
Hello.
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 That was a bit delayed, isn't it?
All together now.
Hello.
Hello to Ian Kemp. And that's a message from Debbie Harwood to say, happy wiggling. And this week we've got Bridget Strawbridge on the show. Sorry, I said Strawson last week. Ricardo, you've been off at the show. How did you get on at...
Malvern Spring Show. Yeah, it went really well. It was a fantastic... I mean, the weather was stunning. You know, it was about as good a weather as you could imagine possible. And we were in that nice situation with the breeze coming through, you know, so it wasn't just kind of like it is normally where the breeze is coming through and you're wrapped up in your fleece and all your woolies because it's that hideous and cold and wet. So nothing like last year. Lots and lots of folks, lots of interesting things going on. And because we were at the Caves Folly Marquee at the top, we had a little a talks area as well. So a few of us gave talks there, and people sat down. And I had an email from somebody who had sat in on one of my talks at the Malvern show.
Any good?
And he said it was fantastic. And because he'd asked me about squirrels, you see. And of course, people, what they don't do when you wax lyrical about wildlife, they don't expect the speaker to say, shoot them. When they ask, what can I do with my squirrels? But invariably, people really love it. So the email was, thanks very much for Richard's great talk, and so on and so forth. But please could you ask him what I'm supposed to do with the 40 dead squirrels that I've got at the bottom of the garden now?
Funny you should say that, because on Facebook we've got exactly the same issue. And somebody has asked, if you live trap a squirrel, are you allowed to move it and let it out? And somebody else has asked, have you got any squirrel recipes? So obviously they're not going to let it out.
No. We did have a load of squirrel recipes. Way back when Robin Page came and joined us, and he feasted on some squirrel burgers. Rach had a load, some like Cajun squirrel and things like that. Some really nice recipes. But I was talking about cooking squirrels while they talk. You know, it's good. You know, the exercise is to stop them thieving all your birds' eggs and your birds and your peanuts and everything else, and killing everything that's killable. And you know, eat the suckers. But letting squirrels out of traps isn't a good thing to do. You know, this is the problem is, you see, people have an idea that if they catch mice in their home or squirrels or rats and so on and so forth, and they go and release them 10 miles down the road, then that'll solve the problem for them, which kind of might do, but lots of the times things will come back. But the problem is you're offloading your problem into something else. Now, for instance, if you caught a rat and you took it off onto, I don't know, the top of Dartmoor, released your rat thinking, well, that's fine, it's not going to cause a problem to anybody else. Well, of course, it might eat some eggs from ground nesting birds and so on. And squirrels are exactly the same thing. In fact, I mean, not that I'm, toe the line in terms of abiding by the law all the time, but it is illegal to do that as well. You're not allowed to release live squirrels and rats.
I was going to say, I think it goes for all wild animals, doesn't it? You're not allowed to move them around.
No, you can't move them around.
Years ago, I remember people got into quite serious trouble with bagged foxes. It doesn't happen now, but many years ago, one or two of the hunts used to catch foxes and move them to hunt them, which is very, very bad against the rules.
I mean, the unfortunate thing is people, if they have a pesky town fox, that's often covered in mange, they'll think, we can take that to the countryside and release it, and what a jolly life it'll have. But what often happens is that fox will die anyway because it's in a completely alien environment.
Or Farmer Phil will shoot it.
Or Farmer Phil might shoot it.
Well, we have them here, they starve to death.
But
we'll find them sat in the middle of the field, looking round them, completely perplexed, and if we're out at night with a tractor, they'll come to the lights because that's what they understand coming from the town. You can always tell them, and they're a different colour. They're usually funny colours.
Right.
And they'll come to the lights expecting dustbins or whatever.
Yeah.
And as you say, they've usually got mange.
They get a high-speed lead injection instead.
Well, I mean, frankly, you don't really need to worry about shooting them because they can't catch anything. They've not been brought up to catch anything that I'm worried about.
No, that's
the
right.
biggest problem is that they tend to get into bad habits. So that we're not sheep farmers, but if you've got lambs, it'll be the town foxes that go after lambs and animals that aren't well long before a wild one will.
Yeah,
I know how to fix that, Farmer Phil.
So do I.
You need 2 alpacas. At Highgrove, David Wilson had 2 alpacas looking after his lambs, and he, instead of losing 50, he's lost 0 this year. And the alpacas just sort of go around the place, and if anything comes up to them, like we did, they just come forward, and they've got a real presence, and they've stopped any of his lambs getting caught.
Right.
But they're really expensive, so he's just borrowed them. And so, thank you to everyone who gives us a review on iTunes. It's a really kind thing to do. So thank you to Wissy Woo. And I've got the second one here. We've got 2 reviews in 1 week. So I will pass this pooter to Ricardo for the second 5-star Wiggly-tastic review from Kathy
what have we got
Quinn.
Here? Okay, where are we? Kathy Quinn. Kuthi Quinn.
Sorry.
Kuthi Quine, in fact, I think it is, possibly.
Kuthi Quine.
Kuthi Quine.
Kathy Quinn.
A warm, funny, witty podcast that helps to get green gardening environmentalists firmly planted in the realities of life. Very down to earth, in brackets, and often down to manure. Informal chatting about the issues facing us and really practical advice on simple ways that we can make a difference. Fantastic. 5 stars.
That's nice, isn't it? If you get a chance to go and give us a review, go to iTunes. It's really hard to do, but something like click on something on Wiggly Wigglers and you're away. Farmer Phil, tell us about your peas, love.
We finished planting the peas. They've gone in absolutely perfect conditions. Really pleased with that. It was worth waiting. The soil structure has come back really well. We've been sort of essentially correcting some of the problems caused by last year's ridiculously heavy rainfall that we had in May, June time. If those of you in England remember, we were flooded out and all sorts. And the soil has got really tight. And so by ploughing it up now, we're correcting the last of that and the soil structure is back as it should be. So we're having a little bit of the old soft refreshing this morning, which would just be perfect on them. So really pleased with that. That's gone well.
Let's go out and hear about the big green mean machine. Okay, so I'm at a Heath Robinson type contraption, which appears to have a tractor in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Just describe what this is.
Well, what this is what we plant the corn with. The idea is that when we plough the field, we tow a furrow press behind the plough, which is like a sort of selection of heavy rings that both press and break down the surface of the ploughing, so that we get a reasonably level surface to drill into. And then this machine...
What's drill?
Drill is to plant the seed. So you set the seed out in a seed drill, which is a slot in the ground.
Right, so does it push it down in a hole, or does it make a, like you do with a hoe? Does it?
Yeah, most drills work on the basis that they will make a drill, so they'll draw a slot in the ground,
Yeah.
and then it drops the seed in the slot.
And does it cover the slot up?
well then you have a harrow after the drill to cover the seed in.
Right, so let's go to the front of the tractor then, because that must be what hits the soil first.
Yeah.
You've got these double wheels on it.
Yeah. So
what's that for then?
The tractor has dual wheels all round, and the reason for that is so that it sits low ground pressure on top of the soil, doesn't do any damage to the soil underneath.
This is the principle of saving somebody on ice.
Yes,
Isn't
spread the weight. Yes, that's true enough.
Never walk onto ice.
No.
You have to lie down, don't you?
Well, the reason for this is that we want to put into the front of the machine on the back of the tractor as even a surface as we can.
Right.
So that you don't have to have it over deep to work out any wheel marks. So right on the front here, you've got another press, which is a selection of cast iron rings with gaps between them. And the idea of this, well, it has two purposes. One, you'll see that there are gaps where the wheels are.
Yeah.
You don't need to press that bit because the wheels will do it.
Right.
And then it presses down any bits that the furrow press behind the plough hasn't moved or whatever. And in addition to that, it acts as a counterbalance. When we pick everything up, the drill on the back is heavy. And so that this acts as a counterbalance so that we don't have to carry dead weight around on the front of the tractor.
Okay, so now we're heading to the back of the tractor.
Right.
Which is a big green one, as usual. So the next thing that must hit it is this green bit.
Yes, now
called the Dowdeswell.
The green bit, this is a power harrow, and we have two alternatives to go in this slot. We have this one, which is the more power-hungry diesel guzzling version, which is basically a set of rotating tines that are turned by the tractor's engine that smash up the soil and create a finer tilth then, if you like.
So what would this be in the garden?
Your rotavator.
Right.
Although the tines rotate the other way, but certainly it does a similar job.
So what's this do?
So this knocks down, you've pressed the field, the ploughing, the tractor's driven on the bits that you missed with the press, so it's basically flat and hopefully quite firm coming into this. This will then reduce the size of the soil particles, knock them down into a tilth. The idea is not to have it too deep, basically because if you put it in any depth, it requires a huge amount of power to drive it.
Where do you buy this from?
This particular one, it came from a farm sale. It was one that we saw that we bought.
Second hand?
Yeah.
How much was it?
I can't remember.
What, £2,000?
Yeah,
£20,000?
No, it was about £2,000 or something.
It's big, isn't it? For the money.
It was another Farmer Phil's bargain.
Have we got any eBay purchases on the vehicle?
Not on this one, I don't think.
Right,
Not
unusual.
just that
Okay, so then you've got a red thing.
one. Well, before we leave the green thing, so that you've got the rotors that smash the soil down, and then you'll see behind that, you've got a big toothed packer roller.
Yeah.
Now that is the roller that all the weight of this drill sits on when it's drilling.
Right.
And the reason for that is that will firm the ground down. And the reason we want to firm the ground down is because that will inhibit the slugs moving around, and if a slug can't move around, then it can't breed, and it will not eat the crop as badly. And also, by having a solid packer roller like that carries the weight nicely, when we're actually drilling, the weight that's on the tractor is just the weight of the tractor. So again, we're reducing compaction and spreading the weight over as much surface area as we can. Now, this green power harrow, when conditions are easier, or when we're on light land, so when the land is more friable, we replace that with just a spring tine, what we call a drill mate. So it's, instead of having powered harrows, it's just got spring tines and a levelling board, and it has a flexi coil instead of the packer, which is like a sort of cylinder, like a helix.
Right, so how do you choose when to use which?
Well, if it's dry and the soil's friable, we'll use the drill mate. As it gets wetter, or as at the moment the soil is what we call, it's just tough, it's tight, difficult to deal with, then we'll use the power harrow because we can achieve the result that we need to.
Doesn't look the most sympathetic of machines.
It's not the most sympathetic of machines, and there is the danger that you'll use it in conditions when you shouldn't, i.e. when it's too wet. It does allow you, should you choose to go when any other time you probably wouldn't. But from our point of view, we've worked it out and set it up so that ground compaction is at a minimum, it does extend the conditions that we can go reasonably in.
Okay, so now we're on to the red thing.
Now the red thing sits piggyback
Which seems to be
style.
tied on with a piece of orange string.
Good stuff, Balatine. It's important and crucial to our...
There is a reason for that.
What is the reason, Kev? I'll just go around to Kevin because he drives this contraption.
The reason for that is to stop me keep getting on and off.
Right.
Because when that comes back up,
What is that?
that's a boat marker.
A what?
A boat marker.
Right,
That marks where I travel the next time down the field.
right.
When that goes back up,
Yeah.
that cable will flick the wrong side of that.
Right, so
Now,
the
when you
cable
let
will
it-
go the other side
Yeah.
of the green power harrow thing and it will get caught
When
so
you
it
let
won't
that
fall back down.
That won't fall down. That bit of string stops it doing that.
You could sell that invention.
I could, couldn't I?
Now,
And I know where there's plenty of string.
very much money.
and now, Kev, just while you're here, how long would it take you? That field out there's 35 acres.
Well, out where Phil is,
Yeah.
38.
38 acres. How long will that take you to plant if the going's okay?
Just short of a day if I have a decent day.
And how many times will you have to load that seed into there? How many bags of seed will you plant?
It depends how much of a rate we're putting on.
Right? How much are you putting on?
I haven't told Kev yet.
I've got to work that out yet.
Roughly speaking, because I don't believe in kilos and hectares, but with peas we're
He's
aiming
old-fashioned.
Right?
just about as old-fashioned as you are. Peas we normally drill at around 200 weights an acre.
Oh.
4 bags of potatoes an acre.
And I can get 1000 weight in that drill.
Right, okay. So how many times will you have to reload your hopper?
Well, you'll use 4 tonnes of seed
Yeah,
roughly
yeah.
out there,
So
so
8
8
times.
Okay. And when are you going to do it?
When he's finished ploughing it.
Is he holding you up?
Yes.
Right.
How would that be? Exactly.
Little farmer feels a bit touchy about when he ploughs. Okay, so let's go to the red thing, Phil.
Very simple device, this.
Doesn't look it.
But essentially you have a hopper at the top in
Yeah.
which the seed sits. Now this drill is called an air drill. So it moves the seed from the hopper to the coulters in a stream of air.
Coulters.
Coulters are the bit that make the drill in the ground. So in this case they're called a Suffolk coulter and they just drag a slot in the ground.
Right.
Interestingly, we use ceramic feet on them so they don't wear out. Now you'll see in the middle at the bottom of the hopper there's a sort of grey bit with a load of cogs on the side of it. Now what happens is that if you look through the door in the bottom you can just see a fluted
Oh, yeah.
wheel. Now that goes round when the peg wheel on the side is in contact with the ground. It drives that round, meters the seed out
Right.
accurately, and you change the speed of it or the width of the flutes to alter the rate. And then the rate is fixed. Doesn't matter how fast or slowly you go, the rate is fixed because you're driving it with a land wheel.
That's clever.
And so in this case, it meters the seed and it then drops it into a venturi, which is where air is being blasted up the drill, and it drops it into that airstream, and then the seed goes up to a distribution head, which then spreads it out into all these separate pipes, one each to each coulter.
How many pipes are there? How many?
I can't remember on this drill.
32.
Kevin tells us.
Okay.
So that it's 4 metres wide,
So it blows the seeds each down each of these pipes.
and it blows it into each of these pipes, into each coulter,
Yeah.
and then you can see how the seed will come down the tube and it will drop out just
Yeah.
behind the ceramic coulter.
Yeah.
And then the following harrow, which is this funny looking thing with lazy Z times
That doesn't
on it.
seem to touch the ground, Phil.
Well, it's in transport position at the moment,
Right.
but it normally will fit on here
Yeah.
and it will go behind the whole thing
And cover the soil up.
and cover the
seed up.
And
Right.
then what we do as a separate pass is to roll it in with a Cambridge roll to firm it again
Right. That's clear then.
as mud.
Happy seeding. Just before we hear from Podchef, let's have a Monty cast.
Montycast, a weekly fact on farming. A chicken can have 4 or 5 toes on each foot. Another Montycast next week.
Thank you, Monty. Podchef, come in, please.
Farmer Podchef over in Washington State has been corresponding with me, and he sent me an email entitled Technical Question, which I left unopened for 3 days because it said technical question, because I didn't think that required too much. What he's doing in Washington State is starting to get his garden and farm sorted out for planting, so he does it with a stale seedbed. So he cultivates the garden, hopes that he has some rain, lets the weeds chit, and then cultivates it again to kill them.
Is that rotivating in my world?
Yeah, or with a fork. I don't know whether he does it mechanically or with a fork. But his technical question was about lambs, about which I know absolutely nothing. And his question was, his daughter Anya has just been given or acquired a Frisian Dairy ewe lamb, but the breeder didn't dock its tail. An issue we didn't find out until we drove 100 miles to get it. 100 miles in America seems to me like a trip that Rich and I might make to the pub. You know, they do that. It's common practice around here to dock all lambs due to fly strike. I've seen living maggot-eaten sheep who were docked late, but the woman who sold us the lamb didn't have any of her breeding ewes docked, despite the fact that she was milking them. When I questioned her about this, she claimed that it was a British thing, this non-docking. He goes on to say, as a representative of British agriculture, blah, 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 what did I think about this? Because obviously, you know, there are various ways of docking a lamb's tail, and by docking...
Chopping it off.
Cut it off. Now, there's several issues with this. One is whether to do it at all. 2, how high up the tail you want to cut it off. And 3, how you actually do it and how old the lamb is when you do it. And the options are that you can do it very soon after birth with an elastic rubber band.
Orange rubber band.
Effectively. If it's done when the lamb's young enough, it's actually a very effective way of doing it because it's clean. You don't tend to get infection in the wound. And although it hurts initially, it very soon doesn't seem to hurt them at all. And the end of the tail drops off clean and nice, no trouble at all. Reasons for docking a tail are essentially cleanliness. But there is trend involved as well. But in Britain, at any rate, if the tail gets too mucky, you get fly strike, which is when flies come and lay their eggs in all the muck round the back end, and the maggots will then essentially start to eat the flesh of the sheep, and you get into all sorts of trouble. And so...
Have sheep got a design problem then?
Well...
Because they can't get at their own bottom?
When I... well, that is one issue, but essentially when I thought about Neil's question, I thought about what actually the reasons were. And of course, the design problem is that if you feed a sheep grass that is too good, it will cause it to get its tail all mucky. Now, in Britain, the mountain breeds that live up on the moors, they don't dock their tails because they don't reckon to maintain them very much. But they're eating such coarse grass that their muck is firm and dry, right, so that there's no issue. And this begs the question that when you go down to lowland sheep breeds who are eating good grass, you clip the wool round the tail area so that obviously if there's no wool on the tail, it can't get all claggy and the flies don't get to lay their eggs in it. And there are all these various management ways of doing it. Added into that, amongst the showing fraternity, particularly with the meatier breeds of sheep, there has been a tendency to dock the tails very short, almost totally. And the reason for that is it makes the meat part of the haunch look longer and bigger. But of course the tail's purpose is to protect the anus and the vulva, in the case of a female sheep, from the outside world. So that in this country we've had issues with ravens attacking, and crows will do the same thing. So if they get a chance, and that area of a sheep is pretty tender, it's pretty tender of any of us, so that if you cut the tail off, no protection. So probably there are all these things to balance out.
Why don't you ask Alison, because she has got Swartbless, she's the sheep expert, and I don't think Farmer Phil is qualified. Do you?
Exactly right.
I'll tell you this, it's very odd that we're talking about this now, because last night I had a conversation with someone, because recently I've just delved into the whole world of keeping sheep, and I've got a couple of lambs at home, which we'll talk a little bit more about next week. But I was talking to someone last night about how you worry about all your stock, and things go wrong, and you lose animals through death and things like that. And it seems that often people that don't pay much attention to their stock, and I'm thinking there's a particular example close to me, there's some farmers, they've got this massive great flock of sheep, right, all really long tails, In fact, the whole sheep, they're completely neglected. But interestingly, you've mentioned that point about the fact that the quality of grazing would affect the relevance of the length of tail, because there's very little grazing there. The grazing is very poor, and the sheep have got long tails, which is why perhaps they do survive fly strike more than mine might on really, really good grazing.
That's right. So anyway, I thought, you're dead right. What do I know about sheep?
We'll ask Alison.
So I duly asked Alison, and she threw into the melting pot the added thing that the different breeds of sheep have different amounts of wool around the tail area. So some breeds you can leave undocked much easier, whatever you feed them on, than other breeds. Hers Wartblers are, largely speaking, undocked. So armed with all this plethora of information, I wrote back to Podchef all that lot and told him what I thought, and he wrote back and said yes, that's what he thought. So that was quite
So to dock or not to dock, that is the question.
Well,
it's safer to dog, isn't it?
The jury's...
Can we make that conclusion?
I think the decision we came to was that it's not acceptable to dock very short. Aesthetically. I think in terms of whether to dock at all, it depends on your sheep, what you're feeding them, and what the management protocol is likely to be.
Yeah.
Now, in Podchef's case, they decided to dock. But that brought on another thing. Because the lamb was a bit older, they couldn't use an elastrator ring, so that they then had to do it with local anaesthetic and a knife, essentially,
right,
which runs the risk of infection in the wound, fairly obviously, and increased cost. But that's what they've decided to do.
Oh, he's waffling.
But in amongst this, I've got to add this bit, because Alison then emailed me back, and this is what she said. After lambing, Grandad used to gather the ewes and lambs back into the barn and do the lambs' tails then. Obviously, the lambs were a lot older, so that we're talking lumpers of lambs now, not little baby ones. A sharp penknife was used, and all the lambs had their tails chopped. I would suggest this was probably without local anaesthetic, as that's how farming was. My auntie, if she was home, used to make lamb tail stew. Surely there couldn't have been much meat there.
A lot of lamb tail.
I passed that on to Podchef.
Oh, he's made some.
Funnily enough...
Oh, no!
In the end, we decided to dock the lamb's tail. Between fly strike and the creepiness of sheep with a tail, we have banded it. Before getting your emails, I'd suggested to Anya that we make lamb tail stew. Great minds think alike. It was soundly rejected, as was the idea that we let the dogs use it as a tug toy. So, anyway, that's how it is, and anybody's comments, thoughts and what have you on docking sheep's tails would be interesting to hear, but it's a sort of subject open for argument, I think.
Cosmopolitan magazine have come out with a campaign to ban sunbeds. So I think the Wiggly campaign should be ban aesthetic docking. Any good?
Does it go on though, really? Do people just dock sheep for aesthetic reasons?
Yeah, show sheep.
Really?
Yeah. When we used to show Suffolk sheep, you would see beautiful haunches and a tail above the bits.
Right.
And my dad used to say, it's not on.
Too high.
So ban aesthetic docking and sunbeds, if you like. So, Ricardo, you did a few talks at the show and met up with Bridget Strawbridge.
I did. I met some great people, at the show. I mean, Bridget aside, I had a really interesting chat with Bridget. But lots of folks came up to us at the show stand and said how much they enjoyed the podcast.
They were lying.
They might have been. I just started to get freebies or something like that, get some discount. But I've met some really nice people, some really genuinely lovely people, and people of all different types, and young folks and sort of middle-aged folks and older folks,
Old folks,
so
children.
Not so much children, but so that was great. I mean, actually, one particular, because I didn't get anybody's names, because it was a shame I didn't ask really, because I could have given them a little shout out on the podcast. But one person who came up at the end of, I think it might have been Friday, and she said, "Oh, I love the podcast. It's really great. This lovely bubbly blonde lass." And she was kind of easy on the eye, I've got to say.
Oh, Lord.
Anyway,
We know which customers Ricardo is concentrating on then.
Well, this how things are on the up, you know. And she
Not a Mrs. Slocum,
she's called
then?
Charlotte, so hello, Charlotte.
Oh.
I should say. Yeah, but no, I mean, she was a lot younger than me. I was probably an old man. She probably thinks I'm old. But anyway, so it was great. And I had a chat with Bridget. The other thing I did, which we'll probably listen to in a future episode, I had a chat to a gentleman from the Worcestershire Beekeeping Association, because I'm constantly getting asked about chronic colony collapse and Breur and whatnot in wild bees. And, I kind of know what the situation is, but I wanted to get some gen from the horse's mouth, so I had a little chat with him as well.
Bit of detail on that on Farming Today. That's available as a podcast now, but if you want to hear it, the proper job from the horse's mouth, listen to next week's Wiggly Podcast. In the meantime, hope you have a lovely, lovely week with lovely weather. I've got a fantastic suntan. Best wishes from Blakemere.
Are we introducing Bridget Strawbridge's?
Forgot that.
She's so intent on getting in on a radio programme. The fact that she doesn't look like a Belisha beacon, that she has in fact got a tan.
The whole hair situation's improved dramatically as well. It's,
Right. Let's go to Bridget Strawbridge.
Okay, well, we've come to the Malvern show. I mean, it's been a fantastic show. This is the Saturday, the third day. Bridget Strawbridge, who many of you listeners might recognise that name, featured in a fantastic programme a couple of years ago on the telly called It Ain't Easy Being Green, and it was great, and I was particularly intrigued, and it's an interesting one because there was so much energy went into that programme. I met Dick actually last year at the Hay Festival, and had a chat with him there, and he was talking with the Skies. They had a low carbon footprint home, and he was doing some spiel for them there. So I was particularly intrigued to meet you today, and Will said you were coming, so that was quite nice. And you've got a fantastic project that I wanted to talk to you about. You've done a great speech, a great talk a second ago, very enthusiastic, and I admire that in a speaker, especially when it's this warm on a Saturday afternoon.
Oh, I know, it's warm, isn't it?
So what are you up to?
Well, what I'm doing, I've set up a charity. The charity's called The Big Green Idea, because it's big, it's green, and it's an idea I had.
Right.
And it's basically following on sort of from the series, after the It's Not Easy Being Green series. We got thousands and thousands of email from people who said, we'd like to do this, but we live in flats or rented accommodation, or we can't do it the way you did it. Right. Is there anything we can do?
Right.
I'm thinking, well, God, there's so much that people can do, and I'm not talking about the people who are already halfway there. I'm thinking I would like to try and find a way to reach people who don't have an awful lot of disposable income, or who haven't got gardens, and who may be not sure about the whole green thing.
Right.
So not preaching to the converted. And this is where I came up with this idea, the Big Green Idea. And there's a lot to it, but the project that I'm working on at the moment involves a double-decker bus.
Okay, fantastic. So you're going to, it's a bit like, what was that song with that film with Cliff Richard in?
Oh yeah,
Summer Holiday, is it?
Yeah,
I could
a bit like that, actually.
I could see you in that film. But so you're going to pile into the bus with all your goodies and all your gadgets, which will give people an idea of the kind of things that they can do in their own domestic setting. And presumably then you're going to be stopping off in lots of different places and getting right into the nitty-gritty of some quite developed urban places, really, where people don't have the luxury of space.
Well, especially cities, I think. I mean, I want to go and visit local authorities, outlying communities, and also schools and universities and businesses. Right. And the bus has got, the top deck's got a solar-powered cinema, and it's got a wind turbine on it, so that's going to be a place for DVDs and also for talks and demonstrations to demystify all of this jargon now. People are really confused with so many terms. Absolutely. But then downstairs it's going to be stocked with things, full of things, to help people think outside the box, so they can look at alternative household cleaners, alternative skincare products, or how they can use things to recycle them, reuse them. Things like the sort of things that you do, the bokashi, which people are fascinated by. Yeah. You saw today, out of how many people were here, about 60, 70 people, only 2 of them had come across bokashi.
It's amazing, isn't it, to think, but I think what people often struggle with, certainly lots of gardeners here today, they'll be doing loads of composting, but they're always slightly worried or concerned about what they can do with their protein products.
Yeah.
And of course, what bokashi does is excludes pathogens, so ultimately you can treat those proteins. But there are lots of different things you were showing people. Lots of different, the thermofleece I've got in my home. My walls are insulated with that, and you're absolutely right.
Is my favourite.
When the house after it's not so bad now, but after winter when it's kind of damp, and then you get this warm weather at the spring. Now it's just the smell of sheep. You go now, smell of sheep. But it is wonderful. I love the smell of sheep. I'm not quite sure whether that makes us.
Well, it's things I know. Does it make us very, very sad, very, very weird? But people do. It's nice because people know about insulation. They've heard of sheep's wool insulation, but you don't always get a chance to handle it. And I found that you saw today, if I pass those things around, I pass around hemp, nettle fibre, wool made out of banana leaves and things like that, and the bokashi for people to smell, and the alternative household cleaners for them to smell. Then people, it brings them alive, and it means that instead of hearing them about them or reading about them, they can handle them and touch them. Then you'd be amazed by how many people will then go out and get them. So I thought if I could take all of this out on a bus, and then also lots of alternative technology. So we'll have examples of all the alternative technologies outside, and really, really enthusiastic people who don't preach and who don't judge. So the people who come to the bus don't feel that we're going to pounce on them and try and make them green. Just to find out whether people, whether they care about their health or animal welfare or humanitarian issues or their pockets. It really doesn't matter as long as you can introduce them and get them on the first step of the ladder. And then it tends to go from there, I found.
So people that are listening to this now, what could they do? How can they see where you are, what you're doing, engage with you?
I've got a website, and it's work in progress. So eventually, I want it to be a website where people can go and ask any question they want and get an answer. But it's called The Big Green Idea, and that's it's www.thebiggreenidea.org. And there's a video on there. I didn't say that. If you go to the homepage, there's a picture of a double-decker
YouTube
bus.
thing going on.
It's really good actually. It's a friend of mine who has a little production company, and he's filmed me getting the bus and the beginnings, and that is going to be updated every 2-3 weeks. So you can get, it's an 8-minute video, and it just gives you a real feel for what I'm doing and for the space in the bus, because there's honestly, once you see this, you will want the double-decker bus. I would love to live on it. It's so exciting.
I think it sounds like you might well be living on it.
I know, I think I will, or at least driving it.
So brilliant. When do you think you're going to be on the road? When do you think you're going to be out there?
Realistically, I've got a couple of things I'm aiming for late summer holidays, but probably it's going to be early autumn, and I've got some bookings already, but mostly Herefordshire and Worcestershire, maybe the Eden Project, down to the Eden Project with it.
Fabulous.
And maybe a series of 50 schools around the UK as well. So, and then long-term aim is to have a bus in every region, because obviously that's a far, far better way to cover more at the same time, and it's going to run on recycled chip fat biodiesel, so not on this biofuel.
I was thinking about asking you that question. Good.
People worry about that.
Recycled chip fat is definitely the way to go. I keep thinking about. I'm just not quite. I can't quite justify the time of making my own fuel yet, but I should. I think it's the next step.
Oh yeah, you should try. Except for all, I think so many people are doing it now that the chip shops, pretty much.
There's probably someone that already comes
local
there every Friday night and picks it all up. Well, it's been lovely to meet you.
You
lovely
too.
to talk to you. And I think there's every chance we're going to supply you with lots of bokashi.
That would be really good. That would be really good. I can hand it out to people as testers then. Thank you.
Cheers.
Well done, Rich. You always get great.
I do, you're right.
Well done, Rich. You always get great interviews. They're always better than mine, aren't they?
Yeah, they are,
Yeah. What we'll do is...
That's why you pay me now, I suppose.
It is really, isn't
Not
it?
enough, though, I say to Dad. You always go funny colour when I mention things like that.
I just look in the head like this, thinking, I wish you'd earned me some.
Yeah, right.
So, it's goodbye from the Wiggly Sofa. Farmer Phil, you want to give Ricardo's contact details out?
Well, I was just thinking that Ricardo was particularly interested in all feedback, notably from young females. And if you wish to feedback to Ricardo, his email address is richard@wigglywigglers.co.uk, and he's open to all questions.
Am I? Indeed I am.
So it's goodbye from the Wiggly Sofa here in Blakemere, Herefordshire, on a gentle summer's day. Bye from me, Heather.
Bye from me.
And it's bye from me.
Free spuds, free seed potatoes. That's what they are, really. If you'd like to claim your free bag of seed potatoes, because we've overstocked by squillions and trillions, it's not Richard's fault, really, then put in SO841 into the quick search box. But anyway, we've got lots of them, so you can claim your free kilo bag if you're in the UK when you order online with Wiggly Wigglers or over the phone, SO841. And they're available till we run out. So if you're listening to this in 2015, forget it. Really, leave it. It is May, June time 2008 that they're available. Bye.